We can start, I think. Distinguished guests, dear colleagues, panelists, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and welcome to the panel entitled "What Can We Do for the European Union? Western Balkan Contribution to the Conference on the Future of Europe, Voices from the Region." My name is Zoran Nechev, and I would be the moderator of this, obviously, stellar panel of speakers. We have today with us Mr. Jacques Mer, member of the French National Assembly, Ms. Alexandra Tomanic, Executive Director of the European Fund for the Balkans, Ms. Tanja Fajon, member of the European Parliament, Ms. Jovana Marovic, Executive Director of the Political Network and member of BIEPAC, Ms. Angelina Einhorst, Managing Director for Europe at the European External Action Service, Ms. Donika Emini, Executive Director of Civicus Platform and member also of BIEPAC, Mr. Roderick Parks, Director of Research at the German Council on Foreign Relations, Ms. Alba Cela, Executive Director at the Albanian Institute for International Studies, and finally, Ms. Nejma Jananovic, Associate Professor at the Faculty of Political Science at the University of Sarajevo. The rapporteur of this session is Ms. Jasna Jelisic, Head of the Western Balkan Task Force at EAS. So, under the auspices of the Prespa Forum Dialogue, this panel will be the first in a series of public and civic contributions from the region to the Conference on the Future of Europe. It is organized by the think tank where I work, the Institute for Democracy, here from North Macedonia, in cooperation with the German Council on Foreign Relations and with the support of the European External Action Service Stratcom Western Balkan Task Force. So it is officially the first regional contribution to the conference, event already registered on the conference platform. Once we finish, there will be a report that will be also uploaded on the platform so everyone can read it. The place where this first regional contribution is being made is significant as well. For people who care about the European Union and care about the Western Balkans, Prespa became known for a brave leadership and for reaching wise compromises, a place of mutual respect and of constructive diplomacy. It is seen as a symbol of finding solutions instead of multiplying problems, focusing on building friendship, first between neighbors. As such, Prespa Forum Dialogue is a natural place for the Western Balkan contribution to the future of Europe. In May 2021, the EU launched this conference, a new bottom-up and pan-European initiative aimed to give citizens, civil society and authorities a greater say in EU policy making. The conference offers a new public forum for an open, inclusive and transparent debate with citizens around a number of key priorities and challenges, and will run until spring 2022. The Western Balkan region is a priority for the European Union, and the EU is already the main political, economic, trade partner of the region. People from the EU and from the Western Balkans do not only share common history and culture, but they also share a common future. It is then only natural for the Western Balkans to be included in the discussion for the EU's future. Listening to what citizens of the Western Balkans have to say in this exchange between citizens across the continent will enrich the debates of the Conference on the Future of Europe. The voices from the Western Balkans need to be heard in this context. The experts on this panel care about the region and care about the European Union. And this was the driving force to create this panel. What echoed yesterday in many of the discussion was that the Western Balkans is not in a good shape at the moment, and the EU is not in a good shape neither. So this is obviously one of those moments of help me to help you. Hence the title of our panel. Many people in the region are keen to start becoming the source of solutions. We exist and we want to contribute and help. We want to become part of the European family and not to stay anyone's playground for power politics. I think I can speak on behalf of the think tanks present on the panel that the region has a potential to contribute in building Europe whole, free and at peace once and for all, and that the region has the capacity to offer solutions. The framework of the Conference on the Future of Europe is a perfect framework for us as we share the same problems and challenges across Europe. I'm happy that we, think tanks from the region, can start articulating those ideas starting from today. And it is not only us, the institutions of the European Union are also here to help us. The Western Balkan Task Force of the European External Action Service has provided a helping hand, and in this way, updating the image of the region across Europe. To that end, they have produced a global social media campaign called Europeans Making a Difference. The first edition have reached over 10 million viewers in a matter of weeks. Over the last 3 years, this has become a platform for the people of the Western Balkans who live these European values each and every day and enrich our lives in so many ways. Since the Western Balkan Task Force has been supporting us in the organization of this panel, this year's edition of European Making a Difference campaign will start as soon as I stop speaking, and we will have the privilege of having the first public screening of the video featuring the Macedonian participant in this year's campaign. Let's watch it, and you can screen the video now.
Honeyland was an adventure that lasted for 4 years. This journey resulted with 2 nominations for the feature documentary Honeyland. I'm Tamara Kotevska, and I'm the co-director of Honeyland.
When I was 16, I was living abroad for 1 year in USA, and that's when I realized that real stories of real people have even greater potential than fiction stories. Documentary filmmakers are the messengers of the people. We are the ones who should go out when everyone else hides.
Honeyland started as a really humble idea of making a short documentary together with Ljuba Stefanov. The first time when we traveled to the Kirlia, we couldn't find the exact road. This is a very special trip because we will get to see the place where we were living and shooting for 4 years. Also where I learned how to drive in these roads. This is where we saw for the first time what Atice is doing with the bees, and when we realized her life motto, which is take half and leave half for the bees. It's a life wisdom that she reminded the world of, And it's very interesting to explore small community stories because they always give the bigger picture of how it is in the world.
There are a lot of talented filmmakers in the Western Balkans, and I would love to collaborate with them in the future to make more co-productions in Europe, because for us this is a crucial way of creating our films. Traveling, meeting new people, getting inspiration, because we can make a change.
So while we watched it, this video has been uploaded on EA's social media channels, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, as well as on the Institute and the DGAP social media. So please go comment and share it. Now we can slowly move to the speakers. So each of the speakers will have approximately 8 minutes, after which I will open the floor for questions and comments from the audience. The panel is constructed in such a way that it will try to reach a consensus on the realities with which we are faced as a continent, as a first step towards devising a new, fresh and pragmatic approach towards the region. This is why we have one representative from a EU member state, or a EU institution, or a European think tank, and then one from the think tank from the region. So that's the whole idea. So we start with Mr. Jacques Maire, a member of the French National Assembly. I have to note that his contribution has been coordinated with the presidency of the French Republic. And I would like Mr. Maire to focus on the core idea behind the conference. As we all know, it was a French idea. So what are the aims? What are the expectations? So we would like also to hear what is the French perspective of how the Western Balkans can also contribute in shaping the future of their own home and the future of the European family. So, Mr. Maire, your 8 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you to everybody and to the courageous ones who were able to get up early in order to be with us. For the people of my generation, I'm approaching my 60s. This is the third time in our professional life that we are engaged in such a process. First one was the Maastricht Treaty in 1992, then the Convention in 2005. I put aside a bit, I would say, Lisbon Treaty, which was very important, but not that much of a consultation. Then this one. And it's true that for people who are, I would say, newcomer in this kind of event, I'm thinking of the youngsters, we could imagine that this is a moment of, I would say, wishful thinking, trying to build a very nice picture of what could be the ideal Europe with a Christmas tree where everybody puts its own, I would say, elements for a nice picture. The history shows that this is probably a wrong way to achieve something. In 1992, I was in the French Parliament when my minister, who was there to, I would say, for the ratification of Maastricht, knew that there was a no in the referendum in Denmark. And so immediately we stopped the discussion at the Assembly and we decided to trigger, a referendum. And we were very confident because, Europe is something important in France. We managed to have it by a tiny majority of a few persons. Why so? Because at the very moment, people coalesce against, and this is an opportunity for all people who want to say no to something. So I think the trap for this exercise would be, okay, let's design together something which is really, I would say, the dreams in terms of integration, federalism, and so on. And we think that people are not ready for that. So what we are looking for is much more a kind of confirmation of what we should tackle, what we should aim at, what is expected from European people in relation to, I would say, certain topics which should be considered as a priority, maybe health, I don't know, And those topics we shouldn't, I would say, be considered as needed by the people. And in particular, some, I would say, think which could be seen as important in Brussels and in Paris, but not in the field through the evidence. So that's the first point. And as a consequence, of course, it's very important to have ideas, but let us not look for the ideal, the idea that nobody has in order to make it very different, but just be sure that what we will address as an output is very consistent with the expectations. That is the first point. So I wouldn't say no imagination, but I would say consistency and alignment to priorities of people. Of course, in this regard, there is a topic of expectations coming from Balkans, Western Balkan countries. So the arbitrage was to say, okay, they are allowed to post contributions, but not part of the discussion, and in particular, the intergovernmental one. First, you can imagine that there is no, I would say, there is no consensus at all to make it a change for the constitution of Europe. So there is no consensus, and even more, there are some parts of the discussion which already want to stand as, I would say, as fighters. Maybe some of you have listened to the speech of Mr. Orban a few days ago about what does he expect from the convention. He expects the end of the European Court of Justice. He says it plainly like that. He expects the end of the European Parliament, but more national parliaments gathering sometimes, and so on and so forth. So if we go to kind of theological approach, we will go to nowhere. Coming from Western Balkans, we fully understand, I would say, the request for visibility, for proximity, for participation. I think what could be, in my view, and I would say, with all due respect, a bad idea, it's just revendication to be part of the system in advance or whatever. So, but more our contribution, your contribution to what can be, I would say, your input for the way Europe should work. And an example, there is this kind of concept of constellation of Europe constellation with some, I would say, cooperation in certain areas like Schengen, like coopération renforcée, like EMU. Frequently, people said there could be an opposition between regional integration and Europe integration. So, as an example, what could be, for me, what could be very interesting, and how can we see the role of regional integration in Western Balkans within Europe? That would be very important. Because this is something which has, in fact, limited precedent. The second point is about, for me, is not about competition. What was very, very harsh, and the perception of, I would say, of many Western citizens is negative vis-à-vis enlargement, and in particular in Britain, and you know the result, is that competition was not between companies at the end of the day, but between people. Really with a very limited, I would say, infrastructure in terms of social dimension, training, health, and so on. So degradation of living in certain areas in Eastern countries, and popularization of the low middle class in Western countries. So this is something which, of course, will be also addressed at high price by the Western Balkans. So how to tackle that? And above that also, I think many things which are, we expect as from Paris and from others, we expect that Western Balkans come with solutions or ideas to resolve issues. So on the topic which are high on the list when we talk about enlargement. When we talk about enlargement, what is the real reflex of people? More complexity, nothing against Western Balkans, but more complexity, more difficulty to converge, risk related to migration. Of course, France has been heavily attacked, risk related to armed trafficking and terrorism. So what do we have to say on that? How can we be on the solution side in order to contribute, in order to be able to, I would say, to say that we are part, you are part of the solution and not of the problem. So, in a nutshell, just to conclude, of course, there will be, maybe there will be at the end of the day an intergovernmental conference. We will see it. We will see it probably under the French presidency around March and April. It will be a difficult moment for us to combine in the same time French presidency and the very moment of the French presidential elections. That's a challenge. But that's also a guarantee. Guarantees that probably things will be approached in a way which is as much as possible consistent with European expectations. So it has been a risk. President Macron has taken a big risk to launch this initiative. But if we want to things move, if we want, I would say, the bureaucracy of institution not to be, I would say, to be shaken and to be mobilized, I think we have to take risk. And I think that this risk was to be taken. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, and good to hear that we can unleash our imagination to see what are our expectations from the process itself and how Paris is looking at. I think that there are numerous ideas on the table, how we can phase in certain areas, but also how to find a way how we can advance the process of European integration. And definitely when it comes to competition, what is the request here from the Balkans is not only to provide competition between the countries of the Western Balkans, but also compete with the best in the European Union. Because we have seen there are also a lot of examples which do exist also in the European Union, and the letter that Orban published, there is also one mentioning of one certain country from the Western Balkans among this list of 6 or 7 points. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next in line is Alexandra Tomanic, the Executive Director of the European Fund for the Balkans. You have been supporting civil society and think tanks for quite a number of years.
12.
And in your opinion, and based on the discussion of Mr. Mayor, what are these areas and how we can contribute to the future?
Well, good morning, everybody. When I saw the timing of this panel, it was like, wow, the hangover session to discuss the future of Europe. I don't know if that's coincidence, but here we are. Thank you for your question. Well, looking at the state of the EU and looking at where we are and looking at the fact that there are no answers on how to bring the accession process back on track, I think that shows the deep crisis the EU itself is facing. And I think that here the Western Balkans can help, because we can help the EU remember that it initially was a peace project. And I think that once this is back really in the memory and in the consciousness, that a lot of other maybe stuck things will then develop from that. We here do remember lively, unfortunately too lively, what war means, what the threat of war means, and how important peace is. I have the feeling that that's forgotten in the EU and that this has become a historic memory, which is of course good. But having that more present, I think, would really unblock other issues, because they would get a different relevance and importance in being seen like that. One of the questions was like, how do citizens of the Western Balkans see the conference on the future of the EU? I don't think they're really aware. I mean, nobody has spoken to them about that. The discussions on the EU were others, opening, not opening, chapters, clusters, intergovernmental meetings. So I really don't think that citizens are aware, and I think that this is a pity. Of course, it has been said many times that it's a pity that the Western Balkans are not involved from the beginning, not now informally and doing harm reduction, but really strategically from the beginning. A lot has been written. Corina Stratulat and Milena Lazarevic have written a great paper about that a year ago. So there was time and there was knowledge, And also let us remind us who the commissioner is, who is in charge. The commissioner is from Croatia, and in particular from Dubrovnik, so her hometown is literally surrounded by the Western Balkans. So it's impossible that we were forgotten. I think that this is really a big pity, because here we have really a lot of not only knowledge in the expert community, but we have a lot of creative people on the ground, creative citizens that deal with all the issues that are even mentioned then as topics for the conference, like migration. When you look what happened last winter, we all remember these pictures from Bosnia of the camps where ordinary people jumped in and helped on this human basis. And I think that from there, a lot of lessons could be drawn. Another topic is the EU as a global player. How will that be possible without involving even parts of your own continent? Then health, we all live now through the pandemic, and we know that health it will not, or any virus will not have respect of EU or Schengen borders. So not taking into account the whole continent when speaking about health is short-sighted. And last but not least, environment and climate change, for example. The Western Balkans are the most polluted area of this continent, and the 16 thermal power plants that are located in our region pollute more than the 250 we see in the EU. So any climate or environmental plan for the EU will just not be possible, or will lose its value without including the Western Balkans from the start. And this will have not only environmental effects, but also potentially economic effects. The climate law that has been adopted just 2 days ago, where carbonization will be priced, will become an economic problem also for this region. So we are really talking about jobs here, because a foreign investor, I mean, our region trades around 70% with the EU. So the EU is the biggest economic actor, regardless of geopolitical games. When we speak about economy, it's the EU. And producers that export to the EU will need access to clean energy. Otherwise, it will become too expensive. But we don't have clean energy. We even have 2 countries that are planning to construct new coal-based power plants, although they have signed the green agenda and they are aware of the targets there. So I think that we can contribute, but we also need to be included for these things, because setting the climate law, which is great, can have social effects here if we are always being regarded as the other and as the outside. So really starting to look in causal consequences would be very helpful. I think it's a pity that the conference has been shortened from 2 years to 1 year. And even though it was late 1 year, so 1 year people were ready and were listening about it, that it's coming, when you go at the platform, the figures and the numbers there are, for now, really disappointing, because after 2 months, it's less than 20,000 people that have registered so far. And when you go into the different topics, sometimes it's only 500, 800, it's a lot that are actually debating about these topics. So I would like to see it as a pilot. So in any pilot, you make a lot of mistakes, you learn a lot of lessons, and I would like to see this kind of participatory mechanism being established on a maybe more regular basis, and then there would be space also to include the Western Balkans, because it's a conference, last but not least, it's a conference on the future of Europe and not on the future of the EU. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just a reminder, there are certain constraints when it comes to officially registering events on the platform, but there is no geolocation when it comes for ideas. So it's open for everyone. It's also one way that all Western Balkan citizens can post their ideas on the platform. And this is also one of the ways how we should portray our interest in what we are going to call our future home. Thank you, Alexandra. Ms. Fayon, member of the European Parliament, obviously a known friend of enlargement and the Western Balkans also. The European Parliament is one of the signatories of the Joint Declaration on the Conference on the Future of Europe. So it opens the door for also national parliaments, but also civil society organizations to contribute and to try to influence the process through the European Parliament. So can you elaborate a bit on that, and also what are the expectations from the side of the European Parliament as one of the signatories?
Thank you, and good morning to all courageous people that want to discuss about the future of Europe at that time of the day. Why am I saying so? Because I see we have a big challenge. I'm coming from Slovenia, and I very much lack the debate about the European issues or about the European future. And it has not been many years since Slovenia joined the EU in 2004 with the biggest enlargement. It became somehow self-obvious that we are part of European Union, that we are part of Schengen, Euro, that everyone can benefit from it. And it's become even unattractive to discuss about Europe. Why? I think it's also the consequence that politicians maybe too often, and I'm of course one of them, so I should be maybe also self-critical, but I hope I'm not that kind of, often blame Brussels for the bad things or things that they are not capable to do themselves. And they put an attractive light to Brussels, to the political elite, to what is happening far away from our hearts. And we don't have many discussions with citizens, with experts, with civil societies, what kind of Europe we want and what kind of Europe we live today. And for young generation especially, which don't have the memory why the European Union was created, and you mentioned well, the consequence or the bloody wars that if anyone knows best is the people in the Western Balkans, what it means if you don't have peace and stability. Our young generation don't have this historical memory. So we have to speak different language with them, bring them this European Union through different narrative why it is there, and why it's important we share our common values of democracy, of the rule of law, of freedom of media, and so on and so forth. So for young society, at least in my country, often this is very abstract. They don't hear in the schools much about European Union, or it's something, once again, that it's self-obvious. It is important to discuss. We are at some very important crossroad. How this European Union will look in the future after going through several crises. Several crises also caused that we never resolved any crisis well, and we lost our strategic interest because we were fighting with a crisis, always having another fire and not even managed to control it, but we lost this strategic focus, the basis where the Union was created on. That we share common peace and stability, common values that we are still, as a continent, very proud of. We created a really good quality of life, very high values, if you look around us. So we shall be proud of that. And we are too often pessimistic. Maybe I will today try to turn a little bit on an optimistic tone, because discussing on the future of Europe should give us optimism. And in the European Parliament, as you asked me, we wrote a letter to the Commission and the Council to include the citizens of the Western Balkans in the process of discussing the future of Europe, to find an instrument how to engage them, but it didn't fall on the fruitful ground. We got a letter, though, from the 3 members of the Executive Board to say, including the Commissioner from Dubrovnik, that they will give some assurances that the citizens will be properly involved. But seriously, we have a problem. We have a big gap between, on one hand, maybe Brussels Tower or political elites, even in the region, and citizens. And if we don't bring these discussions back to the citizens and engage them in the process, will fail. And we are failing because they don't feel anything tangible from European Union or from the process of the enlargement, the opposite. Discussing for 10, 15 years about technical issues, about closing, opening chapters, not even delivering promises, it's losing a lot of hope in the region. And then even on the top of that, having countries in the EU that are not anymore following the values, and they are still there and having great power and taking great money, it's also bringing a lot of not credibility to the EU. So I sincerely hope that for me, as I'm really close to the region, this region has so much inspiration. It has such great potential and knowledge and fantastic youth generation, young people that really want to be engaged. That when I speak with them or bring them to the European Parliament, I'm impressed how much knowledge there is and how much they want to be empowered. So it's really also a big responsibility from politicians, from institutions, to give them their voice, so they can contribute a lot. We have common history, and we have this region is so full of diversity. It's so rich, and this is such a privilege and advantage to learn from each other. And why I strongly believe that today we need each other more than ever in the past is that we live in a globalized world. We have much bigger challenges around us. When we talk climate change, when we talk energy dependence, when we talk terrorism, everything around us, not a single country in this continent can fight on its own. It's a globalized world. These are different challenges today. That's why we need each other more than ever before. And this is what Europe is about, and our future, and our values. And I think we should be proud of that. And convince young people. I mean, I would love to see a big mass movement of young people all around Europe to fight for our values. I know this might sound abstract, but like they were fighting for climate change or for clean water, why not to fight for values, for freedoms? This is something I often hear from young people, and that could be maybe something to engage them to. Europe is a precious thing. We can lose it. So we have to be aware of that and maybe give more optimism to all of us that we can contribute to each other a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fajon. Yeah, listening to you, I came up with the idea because obviously if the Commissioner Šuica wanted guarantees that it will be actually the citizens that will provide, we can devise a strategy how we can actually provide her with those guarantees and organize with the support of the European Parliament or the External Actions or the Commission, regardless, to provide guarantees that will be actually citizens that will be consulted through the process and manage to organize events in the Balkans. We have the Slovenian presidency, and we can do much more and to provide actual recommendations or talk to citizens in order to find a way how to discuss the future of Europe. Because obviously, you know, when it comes to political elites, we all agree that it's quite difficult and to integrate in the whole process, but there is no, you know, if the guarantees are the only things that stand from, you know, between the civil society and contributing to the future of Europe, I think that we can be, you know, we can be inspirational enough to provide those guarantees. So we can do something on that front.
I just have to apologize that 9:30 I'll have to leave and slowly start my travel. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. Jovana is next. Jovana is coming from Montenegro. When we discuss how to approach the whole thing, yeah, there are certain ideas that talk about how to phase in certain European policies, but also there are quite idea how, on proposals, how to make the Western Balkan more resilient, and also at the same time contribute to the EU attempts to build a genuinely strategic autonomy, something that we have started discussing yesterday. So, Jovana, your 8 minutes.
Thank you, Zoran. As Alexandra already said, since I'm from Montenegro and we are known as lazy people discussing the future of Europe in 9 in the morning, Western Balkans is already contributing to the future of Europe. We already heard that the European Union had lots of problems how to connect the citizens with the EU institutions, and that problem was obvious during the previous enlargement waves, meaning that there was lack of confidence in the EU institutions and lack of understanding how the EU functions, and also lack of connection with what is happening at the EU level and the EU's policy. So I think that including the citizens of the Western Balkans already in some stage and some policy, at least in discussion on the future of Europe, is something which can help in avoiding such issues and problems in the future. And that's something which is really issued at the European Union level. It's not just lack of democracy at the supranational level or at the level of member states. It is also that the EU has to build this connection with its own citizens and to be more like understandable to them. The second thing is that the EU's policy towards the Western Balkans so far had lots of ups and downs, and in that sense, you know, like trying to build the new approach and trying to strengthen democracy and the rule of law in the Western Balkans, it's always that sanctions are at the center of such policies. So this is also the case with the new enlargement methodology, and that's something which there are some model of incentives and sanctions there in the new enlargement methodology, but the part with incentives is really not well discussed or well explained in the new methodology. So I think that this inclusion of the citizens, and also at least at some meetings politicians from the Western Balkans, is something which should be understand as a gradual integration as part of the incentives which should help the building of the rule of law and democracy in the Western Balkans. Then there were a set of focus groups recently. Donika was also there with me. We were discussing what is possible contribution of the Western Balkans to the Future of Europe conference, but not just to the Future of Europe conference, but can we actually imagine how the EU, which we would like to join, should look like? And during these focus groups, some of the words which were there or from the very beginning were justice, security, fairness, democracy. That's something which is the EU known for, but somehow we are feeling that this is missing also in the EU, not just in the Western Balkans. So it turns out that the Western Balkans, at least at the level of academics, civil society, also at the level of institutions, have the vision of the better EU, better Europe, but somehow we are missing that picture from the EU at the moment. But always trying to define new strategic framework, always trying to convince the people in the Western Balkans and also political elites that the enlargement process is alive, that they care about the Western Balkans, that the Western Balkans will be the part of the European Union. Somehow we are missing this link at the moment, and we are missing the real and concrete approach at the ground, on the ground and in the Western Balkans. So I guess with this vision from the Western Balkans, the EU will secure like new energy in this discussion on the future of Europe. And that's something which is really important, I guess, because we are discussing so often at such conferences and also at many other events how the EU should be reformed. So we are not discussing just this approach towards the Western Balkans, but also the system, political system of the European Union. So I agree that the first thing where we can contribute is how to better formulate the EU policies towards the Western Balkans. And as we already know, the enlargement policy is one of the most successful policy from the European Union level. And now we are just discussing whether the EU still has this this transformative power, and whether the EU is still capable to build democracy in its own backyard or in the Western Balkans, which is the countries of the Western Balkans are in line for joining the EU. So the first thing which we would like to change and to be differently defined at the EU level is decision-making process. As we all know, the political decision-making now is taking place and has primacy over the merit-based system, which is at the core of the enlargement process. And we are here in Ohrid, and North Macedonia is the example how this political decision making is really has primacy over the merit-based decision making. That's why we think that the qualified majority should be introduced in the enlargement process, and that the qualified majority should be used for all stages within the integration process, and to be excluded just for the final one for deciding on joining the EU. So I guess that the EU was the one to introduce this multi-speed Europe as a concept. So it should be in place there for countries which would like to integrate more, to have the framework for such thing. And then the second thing is, it was already mentioned here that we would like also to contribute to the functioning of the EU. I was researching for some time the lack of democracy at the EU level, and my idea is that the EU should strengthen the federal elements in its functioning. That's something which is, I guess, common for French position, but it's something which is like impossible scenario at the moment. So it's not about the best case scenario, it's about the possible scenario at the moment, but we would like also to be part of such a discussion, how the EU should look like in the future, and how the EU should be the same, let's say, center and same the power which is guaranteeing the values, as I already mentioned. Justice, security, fairness, democracy, and the rule of law. We are missing it in the Western Balkans, but that's something which is also missing at the moment in some member states, but also from the very beginning at the EU level.
Okay, thanks a lot. We have to speed up the process a little bit as we're running out of time. Next in line is Angelina Einhorst, Managing Director for Europe at the European External Action Service, one of the supporters of this event, and I think one of the ways we can promote the process even further and provide guarantees to the Commissioner that we can really consult the citizens of the region. You have been very vocal in promoting the Western Balkan integration in the EU, and as many around this table, you share our opinion that the Western Balkans should be involved in the process and contribute. As one responsible from the side of the European External Action Service, I would like to see your vision on this issue. Thank you.
A very good morning. It's really great to be here. More people are coming in. That's good. We're going to have hopefully also a good debate. I'll be short in time. Although you gave us 8 minutes, I was surprised because I thought we will make 3 points in 3 minutes. I have 3 points. And this is really first about how groundbreaking this whole idea is. I need to inject this energy in here because otherwise we continue to criticize, oh, it's not going to work, time is short. True, time is very short. But I do agree also this is the start of a process to try to get to that democratic legitimacy of the institutions of the EU as a whole, of Europe. And I would rather really quote President Macron than leaders who like to criticize the idea of having a full-blown movement inside the European Union. And for me, that includes the Balkans. I don't even want to discuss it. It's very clear. Yesterday, Mrs. Mogherini talked about unification of the continent. It goes without saying. So let us just take that as a given and work from there, and work very much, and I like the point made from the colleague in Montenegro, also on inside the member states, right? Because Tanya said it very clearly, in our own countries. They try now to make a movement. It's called EU Elephant in my own country. I mean, I'm a European, but I happen to be born in the Netherlands. That's always what I need to explain. They try to make a movement around the elephant in the room because politicians do not use the EU in their discourse. It's not the way to use to win elections. You can't really get anybody mobilized around it. And I think it's picking up, but it just needs more steam, more energy, even physically. When Tanya says, you know, where are people out in the streets? I see a lot of people out in the streets in front of my office in Schumann, Place Schumann, asking for a lot of actions globally. I rarely see people asking for a unified European Union, a prosperous European Union for all of us on the continent. Where are the leaders in the room who actually look strategically and look forward? So that's one part of the vision. Read President Macron of March 2019, honestly, and look at it again. Just amplify that message, why it is so important. Second, this is really all so new. A digital platform, I agree with you, it's only, what, 20,000 who signed up so far. So that's why we're here today, actually. And this is first, but we are elsewhere saying, sign up, come with your ideas. Look at what we just heard on the panel now. Very good ideas. They're looking in one country at making, you know, it's a silly example, but 9th of May, the national holiday of all of the European Union. It's something where people will start to feel, yes, this is us. This is not just the institutions. But it's also new because the institutions work together for the first time. Parliament and the Council and the Commission together on how to shape that future. In an unpredictable outcome. We really don't know what's going to happen here. And that's where you say it's a risk, but come on, courageous politicians do that because they want a real change here. And then the third point, it was made already, I think there's one very good reason, there are many reasons why we need to do all of this together as one EU, the whole part. But the EU can also learn very, very much from the neighbors, and particularly around us, about EU in the world. It was mentioned, but we need real good ideas on what should be the strategic priorities for the European Union. And there are plenty out there. How can you make decisions better? QMV was mentioned, but there are other good ideas around that. And who do we really want to be then from there? I just wanted to be very concrete today. I hope we have more ideas together on what we can do. Sign up, work, your voice is heard. Let's not be the silent majority, but really go out there and come forward. Thanks. And may I compliment on this? This was so powerful, what we just saw, that video. I just think it's fantastic work.
Okay,
thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you, Angelina. Yeah, and you set an example for a faster pace of talking, so that's good. Now we will switch to 6 minutes for the remaining 4 speakers in order to have at least a little bit of debate afterwards. So yeah, Donika Emini is next from the Civicus platform, member of BIEPAC from Kosovo.
I was expecting to be the last one, coming from Kosovo, learning from the others and giving my input in the end. It was, I mean, thanks for organizing this. It's an interesting exercise. We have been complaining for a long time that we are not included in the debate. So yes, this is the first mechanism in which we can also complain, but also can give our inputs. When I was invited to this panel, I felt like, have you seen Finding Nemo? It's like this fish tries to do the impossible to go into the ocean from the aquarium, and they use the sewage system to go, and then when they go, like after all the struggles, they go like, well, now what? I mean, this is all we wanted, but now that we are here, like, what do? They were all lost. So this is how I felt. I felt like I'm there. I have the opportunity to contribute, but what do I say? Because for a very long time, since the beginning, we actually were the receiving end. We never thought of what we can do for the EU. It was always what the EU can do for us. Even for like the very, very small problems that we have at home, we think first of the EU and then of our, national governments, which then explains how this relationship has been built for years. So that's why we all read the Corina's and Milena's paper, because that was the only thing we could find, and that it speaks volumes about how little we actually talked about this issue. And when then I started this exercise, which was very hard. But then the first thing that came out was how we can strengthen the EU. I mean, outside of this public consultation, in a way, platform that is ongoing for a year, what we can do for the EU is CSDP missions. I mean, the French just mentioned the security challenges through which I believe that the Western Balkans, in a very short time span, from a security consumer became a security provider. I mean, the CSDP missions in which the Western Balkan countries contribute are large at number, and including Serbia here. I mean, there is a very interesting mission in which the Western Balkan countries are deployed in Western Balkan countries, I mean, being the Bosnia and Herzegovina, in which also North Macedonia has a presence there. So, yeah, security, security and stability, and this is what we can offer, because, I mean, we have been the recipient. I'm from Kosovo. We were the lab. I mean, we were the country that received the most presence of international missions. And in Kosovo, the EULEX mission is there because the locals made sure that it continues. I mean, every representative that comes there comes for up to 6 months. It is the locals that actually ensure continuity of the mission. So CSDPs are very important. Terrorism, I mean, I have seen a lot of countries from the EU learning from Kosovo on how to fight violent extremism, because we were very efficient in actually responding to it, preventing, not just, kind of fighting, which was, something that in the EU still is very, very hard to take off. So this is the first perspective. The second perspective is the enlargement, completing the jigsaw. I mean, I've learned a lot about the EU normative power, and what started in 2003 can only be completed with close cooperation of the national government. If there is no political will and work from the national governments in the region, we cannot do that. So what we can do is just help the EU become the global actor we always wanted it to be. I mean, the contribution that the EU gave in the third wave of democratization is immense. So why can't the EU be successful in the Western Balkans? So being successful in Western Balkans is not success just for us, it's also for the EU, finally completing that puzzle and becoming even stronger with a region in which, they can call it a success. That you cannot do in the Eastern Partnership countries, unfortunately. I mean, that region is way much more complex than the Western Balkans. So pick the easy battles and be successful there, So it's a two-way communication in this regard. And the last one is, like the freshness and the energy. I mean, look at us. We woke up so early to talk about the future of Europe. Who will do this in the EU countries? You are constantly talking about this lack of willingness of people to actually contribute. We are learning these tools. Public consultation platform is attractive in Kosovo because it's newly introduced, mechanism. It's like for the first time someone is asking us what to do with something, and we are so proudly, kind of participating in all of these. So why? I mean, this energy, this freshness is there. And lastly, I mean, yes, the platform is there. We can register, we can contribute. What we need is multi-frontal approach from the EU, but also national governments to teach us how to do it and to teach us that we can contribute. And it's a normal public consultation process. I mean, we don't have to be exceptional. What we need is just, provide inputs for things that matter to us. And there are a lot of those. I mean, look at us. Without, even officially included outside of this discussion. We have already participated all over the Balkans with Jovana, asking people, what do you want, the EU future to be? And they speak about values. They want to safeguard the values and use us for good. And then this is something that is an added value to this entire process. So yeah, happy to be here, and I hope we will continue from on now and onwards. I'm looking forward to receiving the group in September in Kosovo and see how Kosovars want the EU to be. So thanks a lot.
Okay. Good. And this is an example if the EU sets a pace that we can follow, and we have the capacities to follow that pace. Okay, next in line, Mr. Roderick Parks, Director of Research at DGAP. So we have heard the position of the initiators of the conference. We have heard the opinion of the institutions. What are the challenges that lay ahead of the Western Balkan as such, or think tanks or citizens that can contribute in through engaging through the Conference on the Future of Europe?
Okay. Thanks, Oren. And I'll also try to be quick. I could see people doing the maths. 8 times 8. Oh shit, we're going to be here until tea time. So I'll try to be quick. And a biographical detail. Although I work for a German organisation, I'm from the UK. So I sort of feel a license to troll the French in a way that the Germans perhaps don't. And so sorry, Jacques. And that's a little bit the back. Please, indeed. That's a little bit the sort of background to what I'll say. I think the Western Balkans can use this sort of French-inspired consultation process to push back a little bit against French geopolitical interests when it comes to sort of EU foreign policy, and I think I'd make the case for that. So I think there's a fair amount of cynicism at the moment about the Conference on the Future of Europe. The idea that it's a sort of pretend listening exercise designed to give some kind of legitimacy to a sort of pre-cooked agenda for the EU, and there is, I think, some truth to that, including in the field of enlargement and foreign policy, that we have this sort of Franco-German agenda around EU autonomy and EU, a sort of geopolitical EU. And when I talk to people in the Balkans, they actually think that agenda might be quite favourable to the Western Balkans. You know, an autonomous EU is one that finally absorbs the Western Balkans, completes its borders, digests its territory, and a geopolitical EU is one that realises the stakes in its near abroad and competes against Russia and Turkey and China to be attractive to its neighbours. Our sense, in my institute anyway, is that the agenda around EU autonomy and a geopolitical EU, as it currently stands, is incredibly negative for the Western Balkans, and that a process like this is a good opportunity to push back against it. As far as we see it, this sort of idea of an autonomous EU is a very defensive mode of crisis management that sort of appeals to sort of French and German neuroses a little bit, and involves putting up buffers, deepening internal regulations, and then trying to apply them to our neighbours. It's also incredibly crisis prone, so it's making us, I think, in Europe a little bit poorer and a little bit more vulnerable, so it's going to knock us into a bit of a negative cycle. In the list of questions, one was about how do the Balkan countries improve the EU's capacity to act. That, to me, is a much more positive way of framing the debate. And the idea of building up the EU's capacity to act is, I think, a distinctly sort of German idea that is more about sort of building up internal EU cohesion and external, sort of externally international relations and connectivity. So it's a much more sort of bottom-up approach towards crisis rather than the sort of more top-down EU autonomy geopolitics. And I think the Western Balkan countries have a strong interest in strengthening that agenda. And I'm happy to talk more about that, but I would just say from my perspective, there are sort of 3 imperatives for Western Balkan countries and societies as they're engaging in this process. The first is stay away from the sort of idea of geopolitical imperatives. It may seem instrumental to go to Berlin and Paris and Brussels and say you need to compete against external, third parties in the Western Balkans, and you need to play hardball. I think that'll backfire. It'll have the opposite effect of what is intended. I think the argument needs to be the EU is actually good at geopolitics. You should engage in the Western Balkans because this is something you're good at and you have a track record on it. And I sort of pick up on what Angelina and Donica have said on this. We're good at this. We don't need to do it because we need to compete. We do it because we can. Second point, and I can see Jacques staring at me. Stay away from the argument about autonomy. And again, this kind of picks up on oh God, I'm getting a sort of vulpine grin. Stay away from the argument about EU autonomy. Do as Donica said. What did the Western Balkans learn from a decade of crises? What can they contribute? And they can. I mean, I spent a lot of time in the Western Balkans during the migration crisis. Spoke to one interior minister and said, when are you going to sign up to EU border standards and technologies? And got the answer, why would we do that? That would mean lowering our standards and scaling back our technologies. We are more advanced than you are. That's a useful lesson for Brussels to get. Third thing, and sorry, I'll stop with this, I think it would be useful for the Western Balkan countries to correct our history a little bit. There is a narrative in Berlin, and I think Paris at the moment, that says we were naive in the 1990s, we believed in the end of history, we launched big, optimistic, open-ended processes like Schengen, the Eurozone, enlargement, etc. And now these are sort of coming back to bite us. As I remember the 1990s, we launched these processes not because history had ended, but because we saw the limitations of traditional conflict resolution tools. So we did things that remelded Europe's borders. I think it would be useful to remember that kind of history and say, actually, we handled difficult geopolitics in the past and we can do it again. More than 6 minutes. Sorry, Zoran. Anyway, the end. But I've trolled the French. So let's have a fight, Jacques.
Okay. Thanks a lot. I guess this will spark a debate afterwards. So the last two speakers are Alba Cela from the Albanian Institute for International Studies and Nejma Đađanović from the University of Sarajevo. I know it's difficult to be the last after such an extensive panel, but we have heard much already, so what would be your added value to this discussion? So maybe first Alba and then Nejma, you can close it.
Thank you, Zoran. I'll take a few seconds to say that it feels good to be here in Ohrid, especially after the last, I don't know, is it fourth, fifth time that we get denied the next step of integration together. So it feels like group therapy to suffer together. And I was looking forward to this, and it does the trick. Also, the title of the panel, I mean, how can we contribute to the future of Europe? In the beginning, like most people, I thought this is a missed opportunity. They did not include us. Well, but actually I've come to change my mind that seeing the determination of all of us, of colleagues, even which are not in this panel, but doing work in this field, I thought, well, we are doing this, we are knocking on the door, we are going to persist, and we are going to get heard. So there might be a way, it's not the formal way, but if we persist and if we have creative enough ideas, then we still can make a difference, and this is what gives me a bit more hope. The first point I want to make, it might be a cliche, but I think it's after the fourth or fifth time that we get refused, I'm going to say this for all the EU people in the room, we need to make clear that our future is the EU's future, and EU's future is our future. You can debate it separately from us, but our futures are entangled together. In what ways? Not only in the ways that are more visible when a crisis comes along and you see that you have to coordinate and you have to work together and you have to bring Frontex to the Albanian border, which is there and is functional, but also when it comes to opportunities. And I think A lot was talked here about what can be, what are some creative ideas that we can bring to the table, and I think this is very, very special time to bring them. What are we doing that is interesting, that can fit into these large strategic priorities of the EU besides the enlargement agenda? We are doing interesting things and they are worth bringing to the table. You have just published some interesting research on supply chains and how the pandemics and the post-pandemic time presents an opportunity for our region to diversify and to shorten their supply chains. We in Kosovo and in Albania have been doing work on successful examples of de-radicalization, fighting violent extremism, and we can bring that into the debate. Other successful NGOs are looking at the green agenda, are looking at the potential to green our economies, and we can bring that. So I think we need a combination of a realist approach. I still think we need to bring to the table that realpolitik of, look, there are other people, there are third-party actors out there, maybe not to the extent that it might backfire, but to the extent that it needs to be acknowledged, and also combine it with the optimist outlook, so to have a real optimist outlook of what we can do. I want to conclude with the first question that was given to us. Do citizens know? Do they engage? Do young people know? At least for Albania, not so much. And here is what we can actually try to self-reflect. And we have the best tools, and we should do more as region civil society to include the citizens and the young people. And I hope here might be the first step to discuss even among each other how we can go about that and to include more people. And it's not just about the conference on future of Europe. This is just a tool, it's an initiative. It's about the future of Europe. Thank you.
Thank you. Nejma, you close.
So 1.5 minutes for me at the end. Well, I just wanted to say that it's never too early. I mean, it was early this morning when we got up, especially for us coming from other hotels in the vicinity, but it's never too early to start really talking about the future. It is difficult to be the last one or among the last at any panel, but it gives me an opportunity sort of to share something that that is authentic a bit, as I have my own platform. I teach at the university in Sarajevo, but I also teach at some of the universities in the EU countries. So I have my own platform. I work with students. I teach courses that are related to the European Union. And every semester, at the beginning of every semester, we do an exercise. We do brainstorming on their ideas, their visions of the European Union, their associations when the European Union is mentioned. And it's a very useful tool for me, not only to test the level of knowledge or the general information that they have, but also of the ideas that they have. And of course, that in many cases, what we put in, what we chart, is something that is related to what is going on, whether it's in the region or within the European Union or even internationally. But there is there is a set of values or core values that are always recognized by the students from this region. Whether it's the freedom of movement, the security, the opportunities for prosperous lives, Schengen, Eurozone, but Eurozone again not related to the complicated decision making and complicated mechanisms, but really related to some kind of harmonization of a very important policy. When I work with when I do the same exercise with my students in the European Union, whether it's Ljubljana or Salzburg, there is a different feedback, and their ideas are quite different. Of course, again, they are shaped by the events to a great extent, but they have a privilege to take for granted some of the benefits of the 60 years of the integration process. And their ideas are different. They do not talk about core values, they talk about concrete problems, and they talk about concrete expectations, what the EU is supposed to deliver and is or is not delivering. So there is a striking difference when we talk about the European Union, even with that generation, depending on what kind of benefits you already have and take them for granted, or whether you're fighting to get to some of these benefits. And I don't doubt that there will be a great interest among the young people from the region, whether they're in the region or studying abroad, to actually take part in shaping this discussion. So I'm slightly more optimistic about the participation of that generation. For all of us who are old enough to remember the first convention on the future of Europe, I have to say that in that aspect I'm not very optimistic. I'm optimistic about the young people, but I'm not optimistic about this process, in the sense that the last time the future of Europe was debated more than 20 years ago, the European, not only did the process fail to launch, I mean, we all know how it ended up, but the European Union ever since went through a number of crises without resolving a single of these crises. And that is, to have this kind of discussion, back then you had an elite-driven process, but at least there were people who you could have criticized or debate with when it came to the ideas. This is not an elite-driven process, but again, we don't have an idea of how it might end up, not only in the terms of solutions that we might get, but also what is going to happen with all these recommendations. Who is going to take them up? Who is going to shape them in a platform that will who is going to work on configuring the European Union? And another important segment there is related to also the first convention on the future of Europe. Back then, when we were discussing some of the issues, we were actually discussing the time that is present now. And the time matters. What the Western Balkans and candidate countries experience is not. How can I say it? It's a process that is already way too long. North Macedonia, Croatia, and Bosnia and Herzegovina started in 1997, so this process is already taking too many generations. And I'm very sad to come to a conclusion that this will be and this will remain a multi-generational project. So it's not only us who are in our 20s when the process started, but it will probably be the generation of my daughter who will finalize eventually this process. And there is one more thing that I would like to share. I think that the Western Balkans especially is under this impression, at least people in my generation who remember former Yugoslavia and this comic group which was called the Surrealists, and their sketch on the future of Europe. So it was a sketch from 1991, and there is they saw the future in which the countries of former Yugoslavia were fighting each other. There was a war in former Yugoslavia, and the last remaining Yugoslav, the last living Yugoslav, was the one to cross the Schengen border and enter the European Union and join the table. Of course, he's exhausted, he's starving, he was fighting, and he joins this wonderful table full of food, and then the fight within the European Union between the member states start. So I think that even the Western Balkans, of course, this doesn't mean much to the Europeans, but for the Western Balkans, there is this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy, that once we join or once we get really, really close, the European Union will start to disintegrate, and we're all very fragile. So if there is a message from the region, it's not only that the region is fragile, but the whole idea of the integration of how to save democracy, how to reform institutions, how to reconfigure them without decomposing the whole structure. It's the message of the fragility.
Okay, yeah, that's why now we promote the concept of resilience. Okay, questions. We have approximately, well, hopefully with the organizers, additional 5 minutes, so we have like 10 minutes in total. Please state your name, affiliation, and whom you are posing the question. So first the lady in the second row, and then Mr. in the first row.
Thank you. Gordana Čomić, Government of Serbia. I may surprise you, but I think Western Balkans already contributed, because what I am witnessing, seeing all the panels, the discussions, the institutions throughout European Union, you started to copycat us. They are much more gossiping about the problems and describing the problems and gossiping about the people than really dreaming about what can happen next if we work hard now. And that is something what I want to pose as a question, because what we are living now partly is a consequence of the fact that we forgot that Martin Luther King, his famous speech, didn't start with, "I have a nightmare," but "I have a dream." So why European Union doesn't want to be a dream builder anymore? You can't be a reality producer if you don't want to be a dream builder. So what we can serve to you is a bad example. We have PhD in societies in gossiping about the problems and strategies, how everything sucks. So don't do that. If you continue, we will be the people coming from your future. So why we are not dream builders?
You expected whom to comment on this thing?
Whoever. I love them all.
Okay, maybe we can take the question from the gentleman in the first row.
Thank you very much. It's rather comments, unfortunately. First of all, again, I mean, I don't like this title of Western Balkans. As a Balkan country, a candidate country from, Turkey. I am the Deputy Foreign Minister of Turkey. So, my British colleague, friend, try to portray Turkey as an enemy or as, I don't know, you wanted to put Turkey against the EU, against the Western Balkans. I think it doesn't fit with the realities, because we restore a couple of mosques and bridges in the Balkans, because we invest $20 billion, because we run some of the airports in the Balkans. Does this really mean that we are a threat? Okay, so maybe I misunderstood. Okay, what can we do for the EU? I can say that as a candidate country, we are doing a lot. Actually, we are, having the burden of migration crisis for the time being. I don't know how many irregular migrants we have in so-called Western Balkans, but we have 4.2 million in Turkey. So already, Turkey is doing a lot for the EU. Few recommendations, by the way, although we are not invited to the conference, we are having our own debate in Turkey for the future of Europe, through civil society, through citizens' participations. We will share our recommendations, whether you like it or not in Brussels, but already I can make few recommendations. One, unanimity rule, has to be changed. Not only in the enlargement policy area, but also in foreign policy area. We have done it already in monetary union. We have done it in Schengen. So if we need to have a geopolitical strong Europe, addressing the citizens, I think this is one area. CSDP missions, again, what we do, Turkey has contributed more than many of the member states to the CSDP missions. We would like to continue to do so, but unfortunately, the new defense and security structure does not include Turkey. We definitely need institutional streamlining in the EU. European Council became a new and more assertive body, and we don't see the European Commission, which should be there. So this is just one suggestion. I don't know how we are going to do it. In terms of migration, counter-terrorism, COVID, Green Deal, Digital Deal, energy security, stronger economy, connectivity, I don't know who else can contribute more than Turkey. I just wanted to share this. So my conclusion is that the EU should include, you know, in all the strategic projects like Digital Europe, Green Europe, I think it has to include all the candidate countries. It will be in the benefits of the EU. I think it will be in the benefits of all of us. So these are some recommendations. Thank you. And also I share the opinion of our colleagues. Since we are discussing the future of Europe, I don't see why you know, all the European countries are not invited, at least those who would like to contribute. Okay, if you want to discuss the future of the EU, you can do it with your own member states, but we are all Europeans at the end. I think it should be an inclusive process. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone would like to comment? Yeah, Angelina, and then Roderick.
Let me thank the two speakers, colleagues, for questions. And if you allow me, I will start with Farouk from Turkey, good friend. And I think I hear you very well, and I know exactly where you come from. Farouk, you are absolutely right. We very often equate Russia, China, Turkey when we talk about the region as such. And this, I think, is an absolute wrong element, and we know why that is, for all the reasons and the good reasons you mentioned too. I think that, and I'm very happy that you say, to have that debate also inside Turkey on the future of Europe is absolutely essential. And I offer to you to help contribute as much as we can. We can do it together, we can do it inside, as much as we can, because this is exactly what we need at this point in time. I also want to comfort you, because you made a number of observations yesterday about the nomenclature Western Balkans. We are actually changing this within our own system. We will refer to Southeast Europe. I remember when the first time I met with one of the foreign ministers of the region 6 years ago, and she told me, look, this Western Balkans is just not okay. And I think it's very true, because Southeast Europe is a far more inclusive, comprehensive concept as we really would like to see it. And also our structure is Europe, so Turkey is part of Europe, very much just replying to what you brought forward also yesterday on another panel. I want to comfort you on that also in public. And yes, the dream...
Can you invite other candidate countries to the debate in Turkey?
And yes, why not? But that is also what I think is actually very useful about this exercise, that, you know, citizens from this region are in the EU member states debating, and not just amongst yourself, but also with, or in Turkey or in other countries. And then briefly on, but it's really very true, you touch right on the heart of the absence of dreams, visions. There's a lot out there, I think, of lack of historical knowledge, for sure, no interest in general in the public, repeating a little bit the short slogans. This is where Twitter comes in and all the others, without looking really at what is all behind. Frankly, I think there's a lot we need to do there to push back, and that's why I referred earlier to a vision. It's not because it's a president of a country, but we need that vision collectively, and we need to carry that forward. So I'm very grateful that you brought that here. We have, though, a lot of good things to learn as well. It's not just this. Yeah.
Yeah, so very, very quickly, I genuinely am your British friend. And my point was precisely that I think there is kind of messaging at the moment in the Western Balkans that they say to the EU, you need to be geopolitically competitive and engage in the Balkans because otherwise China, Russia, Turkey. And I think that's precisely the wrong argument, that we need to engage because we can and because it's part of Europe. So I absolutely don't put them in the same category, and I don't think it's a good argument for engaging in the Balkans. If outside powers do engage in the Balkans, then that can be a very positive thing.
Motivations of three countries
are very different as well. I understand that as well. But
our motivation is exactly what the EU wants. What NATO wants.
We're on the same page. Was I clear or not, Zoran? Right, good.
So we started with as we have a family photo, so we started with Jacques, and we will finish with Jacques, and then we have to go to take our family photo outside. So Jacques, please close the panel.
Thank you very much, and I was very happy to have a chance to come back to certain assertions which have been a bit harsh. First of all, of course we have to take risks, and we do not take risks anymore on Europe generally. In Western Balkans, in the rest of Europe, except for some persons, and we see the reward. Okay, we are in Prespa forum. They took risk, they got the reward. For the first time since Mitterrand, Macron decided in 2017 to raise the blue flag and to say, I fight for Europe. He won the elections. 2 years after, 2019, he said the same thing. Everybody said it will be a mess. We won the European elections 2 years after. So it means that we don't have to be ashamed, and it is sure that in every society, if we have only defensive, I would say, stances about Europe difficulties, we are not able to solve any crisis, which is completely false. We solve many crises, and I don't have the time to elaborate on it. Of course, we will lose, but if we raise the flag, we win. Because there are people who want to commit for positive values. And that's why values are so important. And one single point about state of rule of law, I didn't address it, but there is something which I would gather all of us. Turkey, candidate country, EU, which is the Council of Europe, which is the European Court of Human Rights. And when we see the level of implementation of these decisions by the different member states and by the candidates, I would say it is a lesson to be drawn. And do leverage and make pressure as much as you can in this institution when you're part of in order to ensure the application of this judgment. That is very important, and that is a strong point. Last point, if you also about geopolitics, I didn't get exactly a kind of, I would say, false opposition that Roderick made. For me, it's very simple. Whether we are at the table of discussion or we are at the menu between China and Russia. I wouldn't compare, I would say, Turkey. We've got some problems, but I expect changes in Turkey in the coming years, and I think it's possible. So that's what we bet on, and then we will have much more fruitful discussions. But for Russia and China, China and the US, we're very proud to talk about Biden now, but 3 months ago, it was not about Biden. Huh? And in this moment, we were on the menu. And of course, capacity to act is key, but also capacity to discuss and to have something to say in the discussions. And the way we tackle about trade disputes, and I've got many examples, we tried to make Europe live. And it's true that there might be a French, I would say, perspective on that which is specific. And by the way, it's a responsibility. We represent Europe at the UN Security Council. And we feel it very important that Europe exists. It's not a shared, I would say, participation now, because we are not integrated in terms of foreign policy. We have cooperation, but it's not an integration. But this is, of course, based on capacity to act at 27. Thank you very much.
And with this, we close the panel. Thank you, all the speakers. Thank for the audience for the discussion, and we can proceed further. Thank you.